One other thing that we've seen in the news a lot recently is ChatGPT. And I've done a bit of poking around with that, mostly with Boo on DevCentral. He's been very, very much into it. And for me, I look at it really more as kind of like, a way to very easily get my configurations created, figure out how to have something to make my Terraforms, my Ansibles, and write scripts for me, things of that nature. But I think there are some other security implications for ChatGPT as well. I'm just curious how ChatGPT impacts the security landscape from your perspective.
From my point of view, I'm kind of looking a little bit forward, further forward. We've seen evidence. SharePoint researchers, I think only a few weeks ago, find evidence on forums of attackers using ChatGPT to write malicious code, which I think was, I would say, one of the first real eye openers. But we keep having eye opening events to do with ChatGPT. We have the news that ChatGPT effectively passed an MBA and effectively passed an astrophysics exam, albeit not with an amazing score. But these kind of capabilities are insane, and the fact that it can write code is incredible in and of itself, really. But again, the Checkpoint researchers found that researchers were using them to write malicious code. Now, the code itself wasn't particularly unique. It was info stealers, searching your machine for documents and send them off to a drop zone or a hacker hosted site, effectively kind of encryptors or ransomware type tools. So these tools, this code isn't unique. What is impressive and what is really worrying, and a general trend we've seen for years actually, is that the person actually writing this had zero coding skills, very, very low coding skills, and they didn't need any to write this kind of code. So what we're seeing is a continual lowering of that barrier to entry for anyone that wants to, partake, down the kind of malicious threat actor route, basically, just completely eroding that barrier. Anyone with zero skills can go and ask ChatGPT to give it a basic function and it will write the code. Now, there are warnings in ChatGPT that if it suspects you're writing malicious code or doing something against its terms of service, aren't allowed, it will warn you, but very rarely is it actually stopped, and attackers have already found ways around that.
Boy, it seems to empower your physical or social hackers, give them a brand new bag of tricks almost. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. Even
oh, go ahead, David. Sorry.
I was just going to say, even those, the kind of career hackers, those that have connections in the world, on the forums, whether it's dark or surface web, probably have access to this code and skills already. But as you said, Aubrey, this completely empowers like a brand new generation, if you like, of hackers and hacktivists possibly that don't have the skills or connections to go and lean on to borrow or even purchase code. They can just go and create their own.
Yeah, we used to talk about, script kiddies who would just be reusing someone else's tools. Well, what you're saying is now they don't need to reuse someone else's tools. They can just have ChatGPT write them something that probably does what they were looking for broadly and probably does it okay. I think for me, ChatGPT is like the problem with it, aside from the fact that it lowers the bar so much, is that there's no oversight. So if you're using it to write code and you don't have the coding knowledge to understand what's coming out, and let's face it, if you write a lot of code with it, reviewing all of that code, even for like relatively small amounts, gets time consuming. Reviewing that code for security problems, for vulnerabilities in the code, and you can bet that code will start ending up in commercial products or open source projects. Mm-hmm. And nobody will be keeping an eye on what's coming out and understanding what's coming out. Not to mention the maintainability nightmare, right, of poorly documented code that nobody understands how it works in the first place. And someone's going to have to fix bugs in that.
No, absolutely. And Philippa was chatting with the rest of the lab team yesterday, and Malcolm on the team had a really good point, which is, we talk about vulnerabilities in software libraries. Not good. Vulnerability in OpenSSL or any of the other really, really common libraries could affect dozens, hundreds, thousands of different products and software versions. In theory, though, if we patch that one library, all the other projects that depend on it should benefit from that fix if they update the libraries. That's not necessarily true of the likes of ChatGPT. If ChatGPT is, and I don't know that it is, but if it were to create vulnerable code and create that multiple times for different people, there's no central library that gets used, right? That same vulnerable code is potentially being created dozens, hundreds, thousands of times. Fixing that then becomes much more difficult for anyone that is relying on that code.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that you start to think about. I think about making it easier for attackers to automate social engineering. Right? Think about that for a second. Social engineering right now is probably still one of the most high risk, high impact vectors of attack, right? Because it's one person talking to another person. There's no technical controls for that. There's nothing. There's no firewall I can put in place between an attacker who's going to social engineer a customer service rep or an IT operations person. There's no firewall for that. There's no endpoint security detection. It's hoping that the person that's targeted has the savvy. And true story, just a couple of weeks ago, I got texted something that said, "Oh, Chase fraud alert," and it came from the number that the Chase fraud alert usually comes from, formatted, looked like the Chase fraud alert, and it said, respond back yes or no if you've gotten if you recognize this charge, and I respond back no. Then I immediately get a phone call, which comes from the phone number that's on the back of my Chase card. Okay. And I start talking to this person, and they're like, and eventually they say, well, I need you to text me your username and password. And then I'm like, whoa, wait a second, right? I was all the way down the road with this, and then they asked me to do something I was on the phone with this person, and then I said, hey, I can't send you that, and they said, well, this is the standard practice, and I said, no, I'm a cybersecurity professional. You should never need my password. And then all of a sudden I hear some stammering, and then click. But all that is to say is that there was a very sort of human intensive process there, and it almost got me as a professional, right? So it almost got me. So I can imagine someone who's less savvy getting caught up in that and having a moment where they end up giving away sensitive information purely by accident. Now enter ChatGPT into the mix. One of the things that's made application security such a high target in recent years is going away from the network layer is it's possible to automate a lot of probing for vulnerabilities, right? We can probe and see if there's a SQL injection vulnerability or what have you. That's something that I should then go and focus on exploiting. Imagine automating social engineering at scale, right? Trying to find the vulnerable person that'll give you that information. There's a number of different ways you can kind of look at ChatGPT through that cybersecurity lens. But one that comes to me that makes me break out into a cold sweat a little bit is, hey, social engineering is this really vulnerable vector that we don't have good technical controls for, and now they've got a tool that can make them able to automate it at scale, trying to find that one person who will take the bait.
Yeah, and that's something I was thinking about earlier was, ChatGPT's been trained, right? It's been trained on an enormous data set. We don't know what problems were in the data set it was trained on. I mean, that extends beyond just coding, right? All of the other data it was trained on, like you say, it's passed exams, passed them with not a great score, but that could be because the training data was off. And, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's enormously problematic. I did ask it to write me an episode of This Week in Security, though, and it did a pretty passable job at that. So my job got a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I'm seriously considering employing it as a co-author for new articles on our site. The other aspect of ChatGPT, though, well, a couple actually that I find really a potential worry. We're not quite there yet, but clearly with what people are already doing with it, it's probably not that far away, is the ability to go and find vulnerable code. So ironically, it's not just the risk of creating vulnerable code, it's the ability to say, go and scan every single GitHub repo you can find and find me any vulnerability. And when it gets connected to the internet, which I believe is coming up quite soon, that could be a real problem. Now, hopefully there'll be oversight and controls in place. But again, ChatGPT isn't the only system like this that can do a similar job. So that threat is very, very real. Something that's been causing a lot of very kind of keen interest. I've been speaking a lot recently around automation and bots, the kind of reseller bots, systems that can buy your Taylor Swift tickets before you can, that kind of problem, and the kind of impact it can have to business and retail and so on. Well, a lot of the problem we've got with those automation, those bots, is they are employing algorithms and tools to make their interactions a bit more human, so that mouse movements look less linear and more random, like a human would do. And the typing is a bit more sporadic and not so automated. Well, if you kind of take the logic of ChatGPT and the AI that we're generating and apply that to real-time interactive attacks from AI-based tools, suddenly we've got a potential in, who knows, just a few months' time, maybe a year's time, where there are a huge number of automated attacks that look completely genuine. And that's the problem we've got at the moment. A lot of ways of kind of mitigating these automated attacks is to try and figure out through heuristics and interaction whether it's a human interacting with the site or some kind of bot or script. Well, when that interaction is automated but looks to be completely human, suddenly, your job defending against that kind of automated attack becomes an awful lot more difficult.
Well, may higher powers help the hacker that keeps me from my Taylor Swift tickets. I will have to break out a Loic and Hoic run on whoever that is.